All right, let's get started. So this week we're talking about architecture, and examples is kind of the term I put on this week. But really it's open-ended, just demos and whatever we want to do for a week. So and with my brain fried from 3 lectures of 116, this might be a mistake, but trying to do a completely open-ended lecture, we'll see how it ends up. So let's start with our roadmap. Homework 3, we are right here. We're at the bottom of it. Everything's out there for homework 3. That I covered everything in lecture that I want to talk about it. Since this is an open-ended week, if there are things that are less than clear to you about homework 3, I'd be happy to take suggestions and go over some stuff to make anything that needs to be more clear, make it more clear. We can talk about homework 3 this week. My intent today is to go over deployment, how to take your code and actually send it out there to the world and let people use your code. That's what today will be about. Friday is going to be about reports. I promised one day about reports. We'll save that for Friday. And Wednesday, I have a bunch of ideas, but if y'all have other ideas, is there a final for 312? I mean, I'll answer that question, I guess. No. Effectively, kind of in my mind, your final presentation of your project kind of is the final exam, in the sense that it uses the final exam time. Project presentations at the final exam. But no, there's no actual final. It's in the syllabus. So Wednesday is kind of open-ended. I have ideas. I have things that I'll go over if we don't have any other suggestions. But if you have suggestions, shout them out, and either literally shout them out or in chat all lecture. There was one suggestion I saw at the end of last lecture of using frameworks. I might do that today. That's how open-ended today is. I haven't fully decided what I want to deploy. I just know that I want to deploy something and just show you that whole process of what we're doing in class can just be out there in the real world in a matter of 50 minutes minus the time I'm going to talk about other things. So let's talk about homework 2 for a little bit also, logistically. So homework 2, the grades were out this morning, and I said this in lecture, but had I don't even know what to call it, but a student and a TA had a miscommunication, I'll say. So I just want to clarify this one more time. If you use the recovery opportunity on homework 2, recovery opportunities are automatic. You just get them. They're used automatically. The recovery opportunity submission is open on Autolab now. If you use a recovery opportunity that started this morning, I know the wording in the syllabus doesn't make this as clear. When I wrote the syllabus, I should just update it, but I always feel like a syllabus is a contract, like it's set in stone once I put it out there, but I should allow myself to clarify some language in it. But it says a 1-week extension. An extension would mean like from the deadline, which was last week, you use a recovery opportunity and it was due this morning. That's not the way it works. It's a 1-week extension from when grades are released, or more accurately, a 1-week extension from Monday morning at 9 a.m. So anytime we get the grades out, anytime before 9 a.m. on Monday, which is the grading deadline for the TAs that I hold them to, if grades are out earlier than Monday morning at 9 a.m., then that's just extra time that you get. You can see that you didn't get the learning objectives, and then you have till next Monday, 9 a.m. if you used a recovery opportunity. I mentioned this briefly after homework 1 came back, but it applies to a lot more of you this time. Unfortunately, homework 2, as you all know by now, is a huge jump up in difficulty from homework 1. So unfortunately, a lot of you are using recovery opportunities, so this is more relevant. What are we allowed to use for the project? Pretty much anything. Syllabus has more options than the project sheet. I can talk about project stuff. I think that's a good thing to talk about this week, is a lot of project stuff. Friday's already going to be project. I think we can add a lot more project talk throughout this week. So if you use the recovery opportunity, remember they're on a per learning objective basis. So if you didn't get either of the learning objectives, that's 2 recovery opportunities. If you got one of them but not the other, that's 1 recovery opportunity. You can confirm your recovery opportunities. They're up to date as of like 9:30 this morning. I processed these. Actually, I think it took me a little bit, so maybe 10. But anyway, they're up to date right now. Go to AutoLab, look at your recovery opportunities. Your recovery opportunities used, that'll tell you exactly how many recovery opportunities I have in my records. If you have any discrepancy with that, let me know. We can talk it over and figure that one out. But if you have a recovery opportunity that you use, submit to the recovery opportunity thing. If you submit to that when you didn't need to, I'll just ignore your submission. I did have somebody submit to the Homework 1 recovery opportunity when they didn't need to. I just ignore it. It's not that big of a deal. I assume it was just a mistake that they were trying to submit Homework 2. I don't know what else I have to say about that. And late days, I want to add, I didn't have enough time to finish it this morning, but I'll add late days used. AutoLab enforces the late days. You get the 4 late days, and AutoLab's supposed to do that. But I don't know where you go to check how many late days you have left. Is there a way that it shows you on your end where you can just see how many late days you've used in a very easy way? Yeah, I didn't think so. So I'll add a column here, and submit, what are they even called? An assignment here, where I'm just displaying how many late days you've used according to my records. I keep track of it for each homework, so I have all that data for homework 1 and 2. I can push it to AutoLab, just to make sure we're on the same page with everything. In the grade book it shows. Should I confirm that right now? Can't do that. In the grade book, okay, I'll have to look at that. Yeah, it is PLD, but for some reason I wasn't seeing it anywhere. I'll have to check the grade book. As long as that's tracked in AutoLab, maybe I won't add that thing in on there. And when this doesn't apply to very many of you, but just so I say it in lecture, if late days are ever accidentally used, what I do is give you an extension on that assignment. It's not like a real extension. You can't submit still. We won't grade any new submissions. But I give you an extension just so AutoLab doesn't charge you late days. So anyone who didn't submit Homework 2 at all, once grades were uploaded, they got charged 7 late days. That doesn't make sense. So I just give you a 7-day extension so AutoLab doesn't steal all your late days from you. Okay, any questions about anything? Especially Homework 2. We just had Homework 2 grades released, so any questions on that aren't like specific questions? Regrades, I don't think I went over the procedure after the Homework 1 grades were released, but again, a lot of this will apply to more of you for Homework 2. There's a regrade policy, I guess I can call it. There's a pinned Piazza post that says if you want to request a regrade, go through that procedure. You make a Piazza post private to instructors, and then follow the post and explain in detail like what you're disputing, and then we'll go look into it and see if there was a mistake on our end. Regrade requests are only for application objectives. That said, if there is some egregious mistake on a learning objective, please let me know. I want to fix that. Just come right to me, I guess. Send me, an email. I don't know the best way to do that. But there shouldn't be mistakes on the learning objectives. What we do is, because there's so much at stake for the learning objectives, recovery opportunity usage and stuff, we can't really delay that. So whenever you don't get credit for a learning objective, a second TA goes in and grades it a second time. So we effectively regrade all learning objectives if you didn't get credit automatically. You don't have to request that. It's just something we do automatically. So that said, possibly there's a situation where both TAs had something go wrong. It's very possible. I'd say it's fairly unlikely, but it's certainly possible. If that happens, I'll treat that as a case-by-case situation. But there shouldn't be mistakes in the learning objective grading. But AOs, it's only one pass. So AOs, if you think there is a mistake, do the grade dispute procedure. And then you can talk it over with your TA. And if you're still not happy with that resolution, that's when you come to me, and then we'll resolve it one way or another. Shows recovery opportunities, but not late days. Yeah, the recovery opportunities I manually added there, but late days it doesn't show. Okay, so I'll have to manually add late days too. I have all the data. I just got to upload it to Autolab. It's not that big of a deal. Just add that to my procedure. Okay. Anyone want to talk about logistics more? Okay. Let's talk architecture and examples in architecture, not architecture and examples. Big difference. PyCharm. I guess I can show. I'll start with this Flash server just because I don't know if I want to deploy this one, but a lot of you are using Flask for your project. I assume a lot of you who have talked to me are using Flask, and I just assume most of you will. Why do I have all these imports that I'm not using? So when you're using Flask, it's going to look something like this. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about like using frameworks because I think it's pretty straightforward. I have done lectures on using frameworks before, and I just feel like they're really boring. Like I'm just reading documentation to you. Like all of you should be capable of going through a tutorial and learning the method calls. So I don't like spending too much time on this. If people have, if there's demand for specific things that a lot of you are having trouble with, I'd be happy to go through it and help you out. But using a framework, it's like your homework except 100 times easier. So there's not much I have to say about it, really. But you import the right stuff. I am using, I'm not even using Socket.io. But using sockets, so throwing my app into the socket library, and it just does WebSockets for me. All the handshake, the parsing frames, creating frames, all that's done in one line here, and then I can just send frames. Whenever you want a path, the structure of any, this is the part that I actually want to talk about today, the structure of any framework that you use, it has to do all of the stuff that your framework does. It has to do all of that same stuff. But the structure is going to have some similarities in how it gets that done, and it's going to have some setup where you can very easily add paths to your code, to your server, whereas in your code, a lot of you are still doing, and if you do this the whole semester, it's whatever. It just makes your debugging a little tougher. But a lot of you have the if, else if, else if, else if, else if, or elif, 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 because it's Python. And you're checking if it's a GET request for this path, do this. Elif, it's a GET request for this path, do this. Elif, it's a POST request for this path, do this, et cetera, which is fine. But you wouldn't release that for other people to use. You wouldn't say, hey, here's my framework. If you want to add a path, go into this big elif block and add that path to this elif block. They can't really release a framework for you to use that's like that. So they're all going to have some way for you to easily add paths. And this is Flask's way. They're going to use this annotation. So if it's a GET request for the path / for the root path, call this function, and we're going to have access to any functions that we import from Flask, like make response, which is going to make the response. And then whatever we return is going to be what's sent back to the user. And if we just whatever you return is actually pretty fancy in Flask. If I just return the string hello, it's going to turn that into the appropriate HTTP response. The content type will be text plain. The content length is going to be 5. It's going to do all that stuff for me. I'm calling this make response method so I can add my X content type header, which I'm not sure why I'm not adding it right here. This isn't an app that I've used for anything. I believe I just wrote it as a sample during a lecture at one point in time. So I don't have my no sniff there, and I'm not too concerned. I mean, I can add it. But I'm adding specific headers. If I want to add additional headers to what I have, I'm going to make the response before sending it so I can add headers so I have an opportunity to add those. That's what I'm doing here. And then run the app on whatever host and port you want. And then add as many paths as you want. I set up WebSockets. I didn't even use WebSockets in this. What is this example that I found? I'm pretty sure I just did this one during a lecture. If we're using JavaScript, it's a very similar thing, except different syntax in all. Oh man, this is going to be a bad example. So I don't even have an HTTP path on this one. Well, I don't want to use that. All right, let's get on track to the main event here. So what we want to do is deploy an app to the internet. We're going to need a few things for that. One is we're going to need a place to host our code. What I like to use is DigitalOcean. I'm not sponsored or anything, but I can't even spell ocean, right? I like to use DigitalOcean. And we're going to click the sponsored link, so it costs them money. Which is a hosting service. There are a lot of different hosting services. So for your project, you do have to deploy. I say have to, but for those AOs, there are AOs attached to deployment. 3 of them, which are the only portion of your presentation, is all about deployment. So you can use whatever means you want to deploy, as long as you're deploying to a public space with HTTPS. So you have to be somewhere public on the internet where everybody can access it with encryption, with HTTPS. That's the requirement for that. So DigitalOcean is one of the solutions. I like DigitalOcean. My pitch for it is because it doesn't do much, which might sound weird. But what DigitalOcean does is it creates an Ubuntu image for me. I assume a container, a Docker container, I would guess, but they might have something different than that. I don't care what they set up, as long as they give me an Ubuntu thing that I can SSH into. They gave me an instance of Ubuntu with a static IP address that I can SSH into. And that's all I've ever wanted. Oh, and I have root access on that image. That's all I've ever wanted. That's what DigitalOcean does for me, so that's why I like them. If you use something like AWS, there's all kinds of overhead. You don't have root access to the servers or anything. It gets, I don't know, there's just a lot going on with it. It's taxing on my brain whenever I go to AWS. DigitalOcean says, here's your container, good luck. That's all I want. So I have two what they call droplets here, both with static IP addresses. So I can go to these droplets. I can SSH into them. Let me make this bigger. I can SSH into them. I'll have a command shell in my Ubuntu instance, and I'll be able to do anything. I can do whatever I want. I can install whatever software I need. I can run Docker is the main thing. Usually when I get a droplet, I install Docker, and then I start creating images with Docker and run my apps that way. So let's go into one of these. For that, I'm going to go to my terminal and SSH into it. Oh, that's not leaking information, right? It was not sensitive information. There we go. Just opening a terminal was harder than it had to be. And I'm going to SSH into this one because it's the first one in my history, so why not? So when I SSH into it, I'm logged into this machine, which is sitting somewhere in New York City. If we can look at let's look at the droplet that we just got. It's somewhere in New York City, running on a DigitalOcean server. So I'm SSH'd into that, so I'm logged into that machine. Wow, look at my CPU usage. What am I doing on this thing? Let's find out what's chewing up CPU. And I can do whatever Linux, Ubuntu stuff that I want when I'm over here. CPU, Python 3. Python 3 is taking up a lot of CPU. And I can take a look at what I have, Docker PS. It must be the music ratings. Maybe clicker. and I can see all my apps that I have running. So when we go to a server, what I like to do, oh my goodness, we can do this. I'm just trying to resize a window here. I'll install Docker, and then I'll use Docker to run my apps. And this is where you want to run the Docker in detached mode. You notice that I have all these containers running, but I don't have to be in my terminal. Like if you just run Docker compose up, you'll be, like that terminal window will be running that Docker container and getting all the standard out. If you don't want that, you use -D, and it's going to run in detached mode, which runs your container in the background. So I have all these containers running in the background. Let me try to get them pretty on one line per container. Here we go. And we can see all my apps running. Several containers for some apps. So we have the music ratings app, which we're using in CSE 116 right now, ubratingmusic.com. And we can take a look at this database. This is one of my big regrets at this point that I showed the class that I want to correct right now. I was contemplating whether or not to show this, but because it's embarrassing as hell. But when we used Mongo, I recommended this to some people, to everyone, because I said it in class. If you want to access your database using something like Mongo Compass, so I want to open up Mongo Compass, access my database, and be able to see what's in there at least to help my debug process, I would recommend opening up mapping port 2717 in your Mongo container so you can connect to that port and see what's going on with that. What I didn't know is that this will expose this port to the world. So everyone can access your Mongo container. The way Docker Compose maps ports and builds its network, when you connect on localhost 27017, no matter where that connection comes from, by the time it gets to the to the MongoDB container, MongoDB will treat it as a local connection, a connection from localhost. MongoDB, by default, doesn't allow outside connections for security reasons. It only allows connections from localhost, which is the way I like it for most time, unless I need a remote and then remote access to my database, and then I'll whitelist that IP address or set up a username or password, any other security measures that I want for that. But by default, MongoDB has no username or password requirements and only allows connections on localhost. But when you expose 27017 like this, anyone on the planet can access your database, which I hope I don't have to explain that that's bad. So when you're on your deployed server, I'm going to look at my database that's used for this music ratings app, which a lot of you probably seen in 116. I've been doing it for a while, kind of on and off, different semesters. But they all go to the app, they rate songs, and then we use that song data as a big CSV file, and then they parse that file in their homework to find the top songs of the semester. But I can enter into one of these. Actually, I entered containers already in lecture. We don't need a whole demo on that. But I'm going to enter into my MongoDB container for the music ratings app with Docker exec-it the container ID, and then bash. I want to open up a bash shell. And I can poke around my container. It's an Ubuntu image that's just running MongoDB. So MongoDB bash, which is me right now. I'm using a process to run bash. Mongo and the Mongo daemon bash again. And then top, I'm running top right now. I don't know why bash is on there twice. Maybe I have a hanging session somewhere, because I was just logged into this not too long ago. Maybe we can look at the times. No, I don't care. But importantly, I can enter Mongo. I swear I typed the whole word. What's puncher.com? It's pretty self-explanatory. It is self-explanatory. Mongo. Hey, there it goes. And then I can take a look at my data. I can switch to a specific database. Show collections. And it'll give me all the collections list. I feel like this app is really plugging along, doing something. The server's running a little slow. And I can look at all of the information that I have, which is the ratings for the music. So if I want to say find, db.musicratings.find everything, and then I like to do a .pretty at the end. Oh, maybe I don't want to do .pretty on this one. I did. But it's going to give me the ratings. It'll give you the last 10 records. These songs have a bunch of ratings on them, so there's quite a bit of information here. But I can access the data in my database directly. When I first deployed this app, a week or so ago now, I populated it with a few of my own ratings just to get some seed data in there, so there's something in there for the first person who visits the site. And then I noticed my data disappeared, and I went in the server to debug what happened, and I noticed this sitting here, a new database called README to recover your data. I did show collections. I see a collection called README, so I did db.readme.find everything to see what's in this mysterious collection and why my data wasn't here. And it was somebody who said, whoa, your database is accessible to everybody on the planet. I'm going to go in there and wreck shit. Removed all my data and left me this cute little message, which is a ransom to get my data back. Now, luckily, it was just a few songs that I added just to seed the app, so I didn't really care. Nothing of value was lost. But I had a huge oh shit moment, like, how did this happen? And then very quickly found out what the issue was. This is scary. Like, I'm very security conscious when it comes to the internet. Even I got hacked, which is scary as hell that no matter how careful I am, I can still get hacked. I very quickly looked at all of my other apps to make sure I didn't have the same vulnerability, which thankfully I didn't. This is the first time that I deployed with that port mapping. So that was very, very scary. And the big point of this, if you're thinking, and I mentioned this in class before, but worth mentioning many, many times, if your idea of security is, they ain't coming after me, they're coming after you. Like, I don't use this IP. I use the other one for my UB stuff. I guess I am using this for the song rating, so that's UB. But there's nothing affiliated, like there's nothing special about this IP address. I'm just some dude with a DigitalOcean account, and they attacked my IP address. They found this. They have no idea that's used for class stuff or any of that. And luckily, I didn't have sensitive data on there. And they attacked that. It's because they're scanning IPs. They're just looking at either IPs or domain names and just have scripts to find these things. And whenever they find, oh, hey, I got somebody where I can connect on 27017 on this IP address, then they go in for the attack. And they probably have a script to do the whole thing. No humans were probably involved in this until if I sent that email and said, here's my credit card information, then a human would probably get involved. But I bet no human was even involved in this. But I did lose my data. So don't expose 27017 when you go to deploy, or else you'll lose your data. Yeah. Oh, no. They just do whatever they can to scare you. It's not that I'm aware of. Reporting me and all that, no, that's just to scare me. There's no thing. What are they going to... They're going to find out what songs I like? Like, I don't know what they're reporting. But it's possible it's a real organization, but like I'm not scared. I'm not going to email them and send them all my money. But I thought that was thankfully funny because nothing of value was lost and everything's fine. But be careful out there. Like you can get hacked. It's not enough to say nobody's going to hack me. They'll hack you. They'll find you. All right, so let's get out of there. Exit. I guess I could stay on this server. Actually, this server's running pretty slow. Let me switch to my other one. So this is my server that's running all my course websites. So if we do Docker PS here, we're going to see 116.com, my convention for ports. I'll do 8 and then something that makes sense for the app. So 116, 312. A few other things. Some of these are lecture examples. Towers Revival. I don't know if any of you were in 116 at the time where we had the Towers game where the towers are shooting at you. That's still running. It's just been running for 2 years since I last restarted it. But it says up 19 months. I don't know. Maybe I restarted it 19 months ago. But it's just running. Let me make sure that's working. It should be working. At jessehartloff.com. Sure is. Something's killing this server, though. Maybe somebody's attacking the music ratings app. And it's just running all my stuff. So I have one server that's running multiple sites on it. cc116.com, jessehartloff.com, cc312.com, and I think a few others. jesseiswatching.com, I think that domain expired. cc442.com, I think I let that one expire. Nobody buy it in case I teach that class again. I should just have it auto-renew. cc115.com, which I do auto-renew, even though they don't use it, but someday I'll talk them into using it. I have it just redirecting. I'm like, just tell me your course page, and I'll have it redirect to your course page. Like, cc115. Like the entire app just redirects to the last time when I first set it up. I'm like, what's your course page? And they said they just used Piazza, so I linked it to Piazza. But all it does is redirect to their page. I'm like, just tell me the link each semester. I'll update it. I even gave them access to the repo so they could update it. But they won't use it. I thought it'd be cool, but they don't want to use it. So whatever. So how do I have all these sites running on the same server is the big question. For that, I'm using something called Nginx. That's not the right thing. So Nginx, it's a very powerful piece of software. It runs a web server. And it can be used for a few main things. One, load balancing. If you have a very large app that's running across multiple processes. Multiple processes, you can have it load balance between those processes, and then you can even extend that to multiple servers itself and have a distributed system and have Nginx balance the load between all of those instances of your server running, of your code running, so you don't have to have one box. Well, I don't have to sell you on distributed systems, do I? Like some apps are just too big to be running on one machine. Instead of building supercomputers like way back when people used to, now we have distributed systems. We get a whole bunch of computers and just fill up server rooms with computers, have these distributed systems. Nginx can help balance the load between them to make sure that they're all doing their part. What I use Nginx for is as a reverse proxy server. So when somebody connects to me, to one of my sites, they're going to connect to Nginx. So Nginx is the only thing listening on ports 80 and 443 on my server. Because I guess I can motivate the problem a little more, is if I want multiple apps running on the same server, I can only listen on ports 80 and 443. 80 for HTTP. Like if you just type http://whatever.com or whatever, 312.com, and don't specify a port, it's going to default to 80. And if you use HTTPS, the port defaults to 443. So those are the two ports that we use out on the internet. That's why you never have to type a port number when you're actually surfing the internet. We only use that for dev purposes. When we go to deploy, we want to run our app on port 80 and or 443. So how am I going to run multiple services, multiple apps on the same machine when those apps both need those same ports, and I'm too cheap to buy a separate DigitalOcean droplet for every single one of my apps that I want to deploy? So there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm going to share these resources. I'm nowhere near tapping out this, despite it running kind of slow right now, I'm nowhere near tapping out on my server. So I'm going to use Nginx as a reverse proxy server instead. So Nginx is the only thing on my server listening on ports 80 and 443. And whenever it gets a web request, it's going to check the domain that was used to access this IP and then route it to the appropriate server based on port number. So to configure that, I have a configuration file for each domain name, which is each service that I want to run, each app that I want to run on this server. So if we look at CSE 312, seems like a good one to pick on here. I'm saying if you get a request for CSE312.com, forward it to localhost 8312. So it's going to route that request to the appropriate port number, and then we saw my Docker container. There's so much vocab, so many words to remember. It's going to route that to my appropriate container that's listening on localhost 312, and then forward that to the container to whatever internal port I'm running the app on in that container, which I think was 8000 or 8080. I typically stick with those ones. It's going to route that to inside the container, and then whatever response it gets back, it's going to route back to the user who requested that. So it's a reverse proxy server. It's going to route my traffic based on the domain name in this case. As opposed to a proxy server, like a proxy server would be the user sitting behind a proxy server, and then that proxy server sends its requests out for it and then gets the responses back. This is the same idea. It's a proxy server, but it's server side. So I'm hiding behind a proxy instead of my user hiding behind a proxy. Not necessarily hiding, but it's going to route my traffic in that way. And then I have one of these files for, I catted. So I have one of these files for each domain name. And then I can get the, oh crap, I forgot that domain name. So maybe we'll do it Wednesday because I don't think we're going to get the whole thing, but I let the class pick domain names. So some of the more ridiculous ones are on here are, I'm going to blame my students on. Does a proxy server protect the server in any way? It can. It can. I don't think I'm prepared enough to give a better answer than that. But anything Nginx does, I don't want to speculate right now. But anything Nginx does, any internal protections it has, is going to be applied. Like Nginx can check all the requests and check for certain things. So for example, I won't speculate. I'll be careful with the way I word it. For example, if Nginx were to check for DOS attacks, then it would detect that and stop the attack without constantly sending the request to your server. Nginx is also one of the entities, this one I can say more confidently, it's one of them entities that has a lot of caching built in. It's one of the things where we have to do certain things to bust that caching. Nginx can sometimes get a little aggressive with its caching. If it's expecting the request to be for static content, it might just send that static content without ever talking to our server. So we do have to be a little careful about that. One thing I'm using, which you can see in here, which we'll talk about in much more detail later in the semester, is it's also applying encryption. So we have this question, you should have this question. Everything we're doing in this course is HTTP. All right, everything starts with HTTP. Yeah, we upgrade to WebSocket and stuff, but it's HTTP, importantly not HTTPS. We're not encrypting anything. We're not securing anything with the apps that we build. And then in homework 4, we will encrypt. We will use HTTPS. We will get there. We'll get to HTTPS and actually encrypt our stuff. And when you deploy your project, you have to be running on HTTPS. And the question you should have is, wait, but we're using HTTP all semester. I'm going to have to rewrite everything to use HTTPS, use this different protocol. That sounds like a pain in the ass. Well, it's actually not. So my apps, when I'm deploying, are still just talking HTTPS. Everything you've written in your server is perfectly valid code. It's going to work. It's going to be used as is. And then Nginx, what Nginx is going to do is speak HTTPS. So when Nginx gets a request from out there in the internet, that request is going to be encrypted with HTTPS, and then Nginx is going to get that request, decrypt it, and then forward it to our app. So my app only needs to speak HTTP, and that request and the response are unencrypted only between Nginx and my app, which are running on the same physical server. If somebody can see that communication, I got bigger problems because they have full access to my server. So that's unencrypted, but once it gets to Nginx and before it goes out to the world, it's going to be encrypted. So that's one thing Nginx is going to do for us. You can see the configuration here, and you can see all managed by certbot. I only type a few lines for this, and then I say, certbot, do your thing, and certbot just does the rest and sets up all the encryption. It's fantastic. There's no reason to not encrypt your web traffic these days. It's super easy these days. So we got a few minutes here. Let's find something to deploy. I guess we could I think I usually default to CC 312 just because I know it's going to work. Could we do something more interesting? Steal my token. Steal my token. So if you've seen this is something I use for the hackathon when I do my demo, I forget what it's called. But let's deploy this thing. Oh, not in sites enabled. So let me get back to my root directory. I already have this clone. Oh, no, that's on the other server. Oh, cool. I don't even have it cloned here. So git clone, or else I would have had to just create a new directory. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal. So I'm going to clone the code. I'm going to go into steal my token. I'm going to go into the Docker compose.yaml, and here I actually want to expose the port. The whole idea of this app is that people are supposed to hack me and break things. So I'll have to add that next time. Add the port. I'm not going to do it right now, but add the exposing the port. Why wouldn't I do it right now? Oh, because we only have 5 minutes. Maybe I'll do it next time. So I want to Docker. Oh, that's not why I went into there's a reason I went into this. So I want to change my port just to be something that I know. Actually, 365 I don't think I'm using on this server yet. Let's check. Docker PS. 365 I'm not using, so I'm safe to use this Docker compose file. So Docker compose up -d for detached. I'm not going to bother building and force recreate because I've never built this container on this server before, so I'm safe to just build it. So I'm going to build this, and this is going to be listening on port 8365. A shout out to CC 365. And image first service was not built because it already exists. It did work, right? Steal my token in another Mongo. So I can go to my I don't memorize my IPs. So I'm going to copy my IP address and go to my browser. I'm going to paste my IP address, :8,365. There's my app that I just deployed. So this app is deployed. It's available to the whole world. really all I needed for that was a static IP address and a server listening at that IP address. And I didn't even use Nginx here. So I'm pointing to this app just by using the IP and port number. And that port number, I'm getting that request right to Docker Compose. Docker Compose is saying, oh, I know this port, and forwarding it to my container, and then getting that information to my container running that app. So we just deployed that app to the world. You could do the same thing with your homework code. You get a DigitalOcean droplet, run your app in Docker Compose, and then you can go to that app. It's deployed to the whole world, to the internet right away. We're not going to have time to do domain name and all that stuff. But if you change your Docker Compose to map like port 80 to your internal port instead of 365 like I have here, you can be deployed just at the IP address using the default HTTP port number. I can't do that right now because Nginx is listening on port 80, and I don't want to take down all my apps for the demo. But what I would do, which I think we can pick this one up on Wednesday, I think I can do that and then still talk about some other things as well, is get a domain name that's going to point to this IP address. Oh, actually, I know what we can do in time. CD etc. Oh, man, I forgot my slash. This lag is killing me. I'll go to CSE312.com and just change the port number to 365. Now when I go to CSE312.com, Nginx is going to say, oh, you want port 8365. And it's going to route traffic to my to that port with encryption. Of course, we got certbot and everything set up with encryption. And now I'm reusing that domain name for a different app. Of course, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo that. No, 312.com is back to 312.com. That's how you can, at least part of how you can deploy apps. There's some details. I think I will continue that on Wednesday, fill in just a few details that I skipped over. But install Docker